At the turn of the century, this area that we call Skid Row was where all the railroads from the east ended. And we had thriving industries in California. Produce, the movie industry was just starting to come around. There's still remnants of the gold rush. So you had the migratory pattern was people would come from the east. They'd land here in this basin in Los Angeles, and these were largely males, and they would make their fortunes and send back for their families and these sort of things. So what sprouted up in this area were a series of transient hotels and bars and brothels and amenities that men needed to, break the monotony of working in the fields all day or whatever the case may be. And this became kind of a place, a gambler's den, anything go, lawlessness. As long as you're making your money and doing your thing, people were kind of leaving you alone. And it's funny, if you walk outside, our building here at 6th and San Pedro, and you look at some of the older hotels, the ones that were up at the turn of the century, the Roslyn and the Cecil, you're going to see their signs all face east. And that's because they were attracting people coming off of these railroads here, whereas, hotels further down. Anyway, little trivia. And so what happened here was you had this transient population with no real roots, no community building going on. It's just people were coming in and taking and doing whatever. And that was really, we can see that history now as we look at the housing mix and the structures that you have in this area. And long about, the 70s under the Bradley administration, Los Angeles was fast becoming a world-class city. And so what Tom Bradley, using CRA dollars, decided to do was to build that skyline that we see in Los Angeles. That's the whole Bunker Hill area of downtown. And one of the things that he recognized, that the city founders recognized at that time, was there was a lot of poverty and homelessness and kind of lawlessness going on downtown. And it usually centered around the missions and the places that were service centers that were down here. So, the city decided to move the Union Rescue Mission, Los Angeles Mission, and other service centers that were up on Main Street down here to this nexus of San Pedro and 6th. And that's what they did. And they institute what, they're not proud about, but they will at least talk about it now, a policy of containment. As long as you were in that kind of Skid Row square block area with the nexus of San Pedro and 6th Street, you could do whatever you wanted to do. Just don't cross that line into the western part of downtown where they're building up a financial district and rebuilding Bunker Hill and those sort of things.
When I arrived on Skid Row, it was in 1986, and at that particular time, crack cocaine had just taken Los Angeles by storm. Los Angeles Police Department really didn't know how to deal with it. There were people selling crack cocaine on the police station steps. They moved it from the police station, and they wanted everybody that smoked or dealt with drugs to go to certain streets. They had to close down businesses. A couple of the major hotels in downtown Los Angeles were cited for drug abuse. I've been on the streets and been in a crowd where people are selling and smoking drugs, and a person gets shot, and nobody stops. I mean, nobody misses a beat. He falls, and everything goes on like normal. Police come, pick him up, take him to the hospital. It's just unbelievable. It's like a fairy. I mean, it's something that you would see on TV and say it's not real.
Oh yeah, a guy stomped a woman to death just a block and a half from here. Got angry and stomped her head into the pavement and killed her. That's one of the things that motivated us to move our elderly women out to another place because they're so vulnerable here on the streets of Skid Row. I watched 3 young people beating a man with pipes up here on Fifth, and I jumped and covered his head because they were stomping his head in the pavement and beating him with pipes, and I covered his head so they would stop, and the police pulled up just in time. But those things happen less right now because of the police presence, but they still happen, and they used to happen every day. I couldn't leave the building without seeing a scene like that.
The first day on Skid Row, I got off the number 40 bus on 5th and Broadway, and it was the scariest day of my life. Even though I had been to Vietnam, I had never seen some of the things that I was seeing in the town that I grew up in. It amazed me that the scenery could change in a couple of miles drastically as it did. There was people standing up on the street smoking and selling drugs. The police was driving by like it didn't even concern them. It was just like Babylon, and it terrified me. The first week I arrived on Skid Row, I was so petrified that I stayed in the Alexander Hotel for a week. I didn't go out my room. I had everything brought in to me. At that particular time, I had a little bit of funds, so I spent it up. Then, as I started going outside those surroundings, I started exploring my addiction, and it just progressed from that point on. At this particular time, cocaine was my drug of choice. I was smoking rock, and it went from a recreational addiction to maybe a couple $100s a day. From Disneyland to hell, you know. But it went in such a way that you didn't realize where you were going or what was becoming of you until you woke up one day and said, how did I get myself here? You know, I went from name brand clothes, the clothes out of Missions, from sleeping in a bed to sleeping on the street. Sometimes during the rainy season, half my body buried in water, you know, and thinking it was okay. It's the effects of drugs, and later on I found out that because I had experienced certain things, that I just didn't want to deal with certain things. And like I said, you give up a piece of you every day, and you don't really miss it until you're empty. You know, it's like a saying my mother once told me, you never miss your water till your well runs dry. So as long as you got water in your pitcher, you don't think about where it's coming from or how long it's got to last you. And that's the way my life went.